Story 1. I blew my car's tire, and my friend came in to bail me out. We're both straight dudes and forgot it was Valentine's. We decided to have dinner and both were coming from important meetings, so we had suits on. We didn't catch on until the end on how the entire wait staff thought we were just the cutest gay couple. Story 2. I served at a Japanese hibachi restaurant and once had a couple come in, and the man dumped her after the meal. She then got up and threw up in a trail probably a good 20 feet as she ran to the bathroom. The man got up and left the girl, and I was left to clean the mess. Story 3. There was a note in our reservations that it was an engagement. They wanted champagne, a specific seat, and a bunch of other stuff. The server comes up to the table with something like, "So I read we are celebrating an engagement. Congratulations." Confusion from the woman. Glaring from the guy. He hadn't proposed yet. She ruined it. Story 4. These two were on a date and the guy went to use the bathroom. The girl just up and left after he went to the restroom. When the guy came back, he sat around for a while until asking his waitress where she went. She replied that she left. The guy then asked the waitress if she would go on a date with him. The waitress said no. Story 5. Not a waiter, but in my strip club bouncer days, we had one of our regulars get suited up and bring flowers in one Valentine's Day to try and woo one of the dancers. It did not work. Pro tip. If every time you all hang out it involves you giving her money, she is not into you. Story 6. He proposed, she said no. He cried and tried to change her mind for 20 minutes while she sat there stony-faced. She finally got up and walked out. He paid and left in tears. Story 7. I worked at a pretty high-end Mediterranean bistro. My second Valentine's there was probably the busiest night I've ever worked as a server. We had reservations that booked basically the entire restaurant, including the bar and patio, from 4 p.m. to 11 p.m. No walk-ins were to be seated unless a reservation was canceled, or someone with a reservation didn't show up. Most of the customers were pretty understanding and either waited or simply left. One man, however, kept pushing and pushing, asking every 10 minutes how much longer until he was seated, constantly saying how he was a regular customer, and how his date was going to be there at 7. He got there at 6. We insisted that once a table was available and all the customers before him were seated, he would get a table. But because of the number of reservations, we couldn't guarantee he would even get a table at all. At about 6:50, the man lost it, fast walked up to the hostess stand where the reservation book was, grabbed the reservation book, and practically ran out the front door. Now everything is going to complete chaos because the only copy of the reservations for the night, which is barely half over, is gone. Two of the owners ran outside to follow the man and try to get the book back. But by the time they got out, he had already left the parking lot. Even better, 2 hours later, chaos is still running rampant, and the man shows back up saying he has a reservation for 2. 3 of the 5 owners, all brothers, escorted the man and his date out to the parking lot and banned him from the restaurant permanently. They even took a picture of him and posted it in the window saying, "Do not serve this man. Salty man without reservation steals reservation book and then tries to come back later. If anyone wants to use this for a sitcom, feel free. Just let me reprise my role as the waiter, and we can call it even." Story 8. I used to work at the front desk of a hotel. One Valentine's Day, I was working the night shift when a woman came down with a cut above her eye, looking like she had been in a fight. She started sobbing and asked us to call the police, which we did immediately. It turned out her boyfriend had just beaten her during a fight, and it probably wasn't the first time. After the police arrived and took the man away, my manager offered her a different room at no charge, as we needed to leave his belongings where they were for him to pick up the next day. She accepted, and I went with her to help collect her things and move to the new room. There were several bottles of alcohol in the room, which she donated to the front desk staff. I received a bottle of Hypnotic and some vodka. The manager got a bottle of Patron. To top it all off, the man's wife called later that night, saying someone had stolen his card while he was out of town on a business trip. Not one to defend an abuser, I told her where she could find her husband. Fun times. Story 9. I was a delivery driver for a fruit bouquet company, and I had 2 arrangements from the same guy. Routes were made for me and the truck was loaded, so there was no way I could mess this up. I delivered both arrangements to the appropriate address. I headed back to the store to find the store owner and the guy who sent these in an argument. This idiot put the wrong names on the houses, and it was on the card with the arrangement along with the phone numbers. So both women called each other and then called the guy. He tried to say it was my fault, then blamed the person who took the order. He ordered it online. All we did was import the order. I hate Valentine's Day because of that place, but man, was that great. Story 10. I had a Section 1 Valentine's Day that had a marriage proposal, a 40th anniversary, and a breakup all at the same time. The breakup was the worst. The guy brought his high-class date a gift, a mini ceramic bear holding balloons. He presented it when I was at the table, and she looked at it like it was a hot turd. I just knew this was not going to end well. She left at the end of the meal and must have said something because he stayed at the table for another 40 minutes, head down and crying. I felt bad. He saw the celebrations going on at the other tables. Story 11. This was relayed to me by a close friend. An older woman, probably in her upper 90s, was with her teenage grandson at a semi-classy restaurant. She was dressed to the nines, and the grandson was in a nice button-up shirt and dress slacks. As they got seated at their table, the grandson placed a framed photo of what my friend assumed was the boy's grandfather, the husband of the older woman. I found out it would have been their 70th wedding anniversary, but he had passed suddenly, yet peacefully, a few months back. The grandfather had always wanted to take her to a nice restaurant but never had the time or money to do it. So, the grandson saved up his pay from the last couple of months, and even received some donations from other relatives, to take her to the restaurant. They ate dinner, remembering all the good times with the man. They had my friend take a picture, and she did. They tipped my friend very well. By happenstance, my friend ran into the young man some weeks later, finding out that the grandmother passed away a few days after that night, peacefully in her sleep, holding a photo of her beloved husband. He was so happy he could make that night special for her. He said it was the only day he saw her smile since his grandfather passed away. He got the picture they took at the restaurant printed in wallet size and carried it with him in his wallet. Edit. Fixed some spelling and added more details after speaking with my friend again. I am not a great writer, so this might diminish the story. I tried, though. Thank you for the award. I posted this to bring something a little different to the thread, other than cheating spouses. It's sad because the lady lost her soulmate of 70-something years before Valentine's Day, which also would have been their wedding anniversary. Story 12. Not a waiter, but I was a pastry chef at this big resort in Cape Cod. We got a special order from this guy who was coming in for his anniversary on Valentine's Day. He wanted his dessert to have, "Will you marry me?" written on it so he could pop the question when it came out. He called ahead to the front and back kitchen, even came in himself that morning to make sure it was good to go. The whole crew was behind him. We had cooks all night coming in to ask if it had happened yet. I wrote the inscription on the plate and dressed it to the nines with gold leaf and expensive chocolate. I'm taking a picture of the plate just before it's set to go out and notice our head waiter come in with a weird look on his face. He says plainly, "They don't need it." She broke up with him before the entrees hit the table. Story 13. A guy did a backflip and asked a girl to be his Valentine, but she declined. I walked up to him and asked if he was fine. He said it took him a week to perfect. Story 14. I was eating in a fine dining establishment, Chili's, several years ago. In the next booth was a really young guy who had a big bunch of roses on the seat next to him. He kept looking at his watch, looking at the roses, and opening a ring box for a peek at the ring. He did this for half an hour or so, then began calling and texting someone, presumably his girlfriend, repeatedly. As we were waiting for our check, he handed my wife the roses, mumbled something, and walked out. Poor guy. Edit. I don't consider Chili's a fine dining experience. My wife and I had done some shopping and stopped off for a burger and beer afterward. Story 15. A guy proposed to his girlfriend, and she said, no. The guy threw his arms up and ran out of the building. Later, while waiting for someone to pick her up, she told us it was completely out of the blue because they'd only been dating for a few months. Another Valentine's Day, a guy raised a huge fuss over the fact that we wouldn't serve liquor to his underage girlfriend. Story 16. 16 years in hospitality provides some good stories. The most awkward. In my first job as a waitress, a man wanted to propose to his girlfriend. He came in 2 months in advance to book and had everything planned. He intended to pop the question during dessert. We had champagne, balloons, and sparklers ready for the big moment. The time came, he got down on one knee and gave a speech about his love for her. He asked. She said no, placed the ring in her bag, finished her dessert, and left. Quite possibly the most awkward thing I have ever had to witness, alongside around 200 other people. The manager gave him everything for free because he felt so bad for him. I cringed every time I saw him afterward. The most upsetting, I was working as a duty manager and one of the tills kept disconnecting from the network. As I tried to fix it, I could clearly hear the conversation of the table by the waiter's station. It started out sweetly enough with her excitedly telling him she was pregnant. He went quiet and didn't say anything for a bit, then asked her what the plan was. She said she was keeping the baby. He said he didn't want kids and had told her this. She got upset and said she thought he'd be happy and change his mind when he found out. By this point, I had fixed the till, but was unable to step away from this unfolding situation. It turned out she had stopped taking the pill without telling him, thinking she could change his mind. He said he knew she could be a little erratic sometimes, but this was next level. He told her it was over and she could send someone to collect her things as he wanted nothing more to do with her. He called me over to pay the bill and just left. The man never even raised his voice. He just calmly decided he was done and left. I couldn't even look her in the eye and just left her to leave in her own time. The funniest, while managing hotel room service, there was a Valentine's package that included getting each course of the special menu delivered to your room. More than a few couples thought it was a good idea to call for the next course and then start being intimate. Having to help with deliveries due to reception errors, I had the privilege of people answering the door undressed, seeing personal items scattered around, and one instance where other members of the party were continuing in the background. After similar complaints from my team, I had to take action. I ended up calling the offending guests and telling them that if they couldn't respect my team by answering the door in at least a closed dressing gown, they would need to come down and collect the rest of their meal from the restaurant. Bonus from the same night, I had to call an ambulance for a woman with a dislocated shoulder. The man admitted that they were trying to recreate a specific scene in the shower using conditioner. He slipped in the conditioner and fell on her. Story 17. Old man proposed to old woman. He tried to get off the chair to kneel, tripped, and fell, and I assume broke something since he couldn't get back up and we had to call an ambulance. My manager had to drive her teeth to the hospital separately because she had taken them out to eat her soup for some reason and left them on the table in the confusion. Edited to add, I don't know if she said yes. My manager didn't get to see them at the hospital, only pass on her teeth to the nurse. Thank you kindly for the gold and silver, though. Story 18. Bus boy on Las Vegas Strip. An attempted proposal. A man tries to set up a sign with his girlfriend's friends for her to show up and see the ring near a fountain. A duck stole the ring. They found it 2 hours later as it was dropped in the fountain. She still said yes. Free drinks were given. Story 19. Back when I served food at one of those super touristy seafood restaurants, I worked a Valentine's Day double shift. For lunch, this younger couple came in celebrating their 1-year anniversary. I offered my congratulations and proceeded to do my usual spiel before taking orders. The girl looked more and more dismayed the longer I talked. Finally, I got to the end and asked if there were any allergies. She looked directly at her boyfriend and stated, "Yes, I'm allergic to fish and shellfish." Then she looked over at me very sadly. I made sure every aspect of her meal was fine for her. But it was that look of "we've been dating for a year, and he still takes me to a restaurant that could kill me" that really did it for me. Story 20. Not my table, but back in my Olive Garden days, we had a man who looked to be in his mid-20s tap his empty wine glass with a fork to call for the attention of the surrounding strangers. Then, he got down on one knee with a silver band in hand and asked his girlfriend or date to accept this promise ring. She looked horrified from start to finish. Story 21. I was the manager of a wings and pizza place with a full bar. Definitely not the kind of place you'd take someone for a romantic Valentine's Day dinner, but it was still busy because some people aren't very tactful. We had a guy who had called ahead and asked if we could put a ring in a dessert for him, and of course we obliged. He dropped the ring off the day ahead, and I put it in the safe in our office to keep it secure. Fast forward to Valentine's Day. The couple shows up, and they're so obviously in love that she didn't seem to notice or care about the fact that he had brought her to a middle-of-the-road place with a sports bar atmosphere on the most romantic day of the year. They ordered champagne, well, the local winery's best sparkling white, entrees, and it was almost time for dessert. I had used my chef skills to whip up a special chocolate strawberry tart that wasn't on the menu, just for this occasion, because why not try to make their night at least a little fancy? I went to the safe to get the ring, and it wasn't there. I was freaking out big time. I asked everyone there if they knew what had happened to it. My assistant manager on site had no idea, so I called my other assistant, who also had the safe code, and they didn't know either. Finally, my bar manager mentioned that one of the owners had been in earlier and spent a little time in the office. So, at my wit's end, I called the owner. It turns out that he had seen the ring in the safe and thought it was something a customer had left behind. Figuring that he had come into an extremely lucky situation, he decided, like the scumbag he was, that he'd take it for himself and save money on a gift for his wife on Valentine's. So, I asked the server and bar manager to help stall the couple. The server told them that we were going to do something special for their big date and to hold tight. I ran out, hopped in my car, and rushed to get the ring from the owner's house because he was, as I had mentioned, a scumbag, and didn't want to be bothered with bringing the ring to the restaurant himself. The bar manager went over to the table and did some complicated, tableside cocktail mix that had a bunch of flair bartending tricks and ended with a flaming shot that, once dropped into the rest, made it smoke. I was really disappointed when I heard about all of this because I would have loved to see it instead of breaking a ton of traffic laws on my quest to get the ring. Finally, I rushed back in after about 15 minutes of being on the brink of a heart attack, placed the ring on the dessert, and had their server take it out. At that point, just about the entire staff was watching the table, and when we saw the look on her face, my heart finally started beating again. She said yes, and I started looking for someone else to work for the very next day.